Tonight's lecturer is Dr. James Chin Moody, the co-founder and CEO of Sendle, Australia's highest-rated parcel delivery service. Sendle helps small businesses thrive through delivery that is simple, reliable, and affordable. Sendle is Australia's first Technology B Corporation and its only 100% carbon-neutral delivery service. Previously, James held roles as Executive Director of Development at CSIRO, Australia's national research agency. He was an Australian National Commissioner for UNESCO, a member of the Australian Bureau of Meteorology and the Australian Bureau of Statistics Advisory Boards, a trustee for the Australian Museum. He is a member of the World Economic Forum's Global Future Council on Technology, Values, and Policy. And before we came to the stage, he showed me another World Economic Forum Digital Futures Council that he's been invited to attend. From 2004 until 2011, James was a panelist on the ABC television program, The New Inventors. James is a PhD in innovation theory from the Australian National University and was Chief Systems Engineer for the Australian satellite FedSat, the first Australian satellite that was launched for 30 years. James is an expert and a leading thinker on the interface between sustainability and innovation, and a co-author of The Sixth Wave, How to Succeed in a Resource-Limited World, which has been published in English, Korean, Japan, and Chinese. Please join me in welcoming James to the podium.
Well, thank you very much, Ashley. It's a real honour and a pleasure to be here with you tonight. And I would like to take a moment to really reflect upon the essential role that the Warren Centre does play on the engineering profession. I think it's just amazing and really important that the engineering profession thinks about entrepreneurship, thinks about innovation, thinks about management, thinks about its role in the broader community. And the role that the Warren Centre plays in helping the profession do that, I think, is really important. So again, I thank you very much for the opportunity to come here and speak. And I'd love to just take a moment to honour the Warren Centre. That introduction, thank you, actually could have been very much shorter, because you could have just said, this is James, he's a complete and utter nerd. Because indeed, that's what I am. And tonight, what I'd like to do is I'd like to nerd out with you a little bit. I have been asked to tell a little bit of my story. But first, what I'd like to talk to you about is really something that I'm deeply passionate about, and it is this concept of innovation. Now, I will start with a bit of a disclaimer that, innovation is such a funny word. I think of it sometimes as a bit like an aerosol word. People spray it around, makes everything smell nice. Often we're using it wrongly. So I'm going to start and really nerd out and ask this question, what is innovation? And I was on a TV show about innovation for quite a while, and many folk, when they think about innovation, they think of something like this. One of my favourite things. Yes, that is indeed a toothbrush mobile phone. Now, I love this thing. I love this thing because I can't actually work out what was going through the person's head when they decided to put a toothbrush and a mobile phone together. Was it, I'm on the phone and I really have these very teeth? Or was it, I'm brushing my teeth and someone needs to call me? I'm not sure. But ladies and gentlemen, I have to say, this is not innovation. What do I mean by it? This is an invention. This is a thing. Innovation is something completely different. Innovation is not a thing, it is a process. It is the process that starts with the creation of the thing, but of course it contains everything else after that. It's the process of marketing the thing, getting the thing to market, producing the thing, convincing someone to actually want to buy a toothbrush mobile phone and actually use the toothbrush mobile phone, and all those steps. And so innovation is much broader than just science and technology. Indeed, it's the entire process of technological change. And again, I'd also like to take a moment here to mention Ron Johnson, who was one of my PhD markers. And he was, and we've had a very long relationship as well, and he was one of the people who really helped me think through these concepts that yes, innovation is much more than just science and technology. It's the entire process. And so if I pull that apart, and again, I did promise I was going to nerd out a little bit, what is innovation? Well, it's actually, it's three things. Right? Yes, it's science and technology. Yes, it's the other thing. If people say, what actually creates technological change? Well, you can change technology, you can change markets, right? A good example of this is the mobile phone, right? The mobile phone was a great technology. Indeed, yes, it hasn't been around for that long. Maybe 30 years. It did revolutionise the way we made phone calls. And then, of course, there was a market. SNS, for example, was a function that we had on mobile phones for a very long time before we actually used it, until we actually were able to convince, the good folk in marketing convinced us that asynchronous communication was just as good, even better than synchronous communication. But here's the thing. Only about, and again, it's hard to put these numbers, a small fraction of actual technological change comes about because of either changes in technology or changes in marketing. Do you know where most technological change actually happens? It's the stuff in the middle. That's called the institutions. It's the ways in which technology reaches market, or market sends signals back around which technologies are more successful than others. And here's a really good way of articulating this. Does anybody know why mobile phone adoption in the US lagged the rest of the world? We think of from the US is really ahead of the world in lots of things. Mobile phone adoption lagged the rest of the world by about 4 years. Does anyone know why that might be? I know Alex knows.
Because they're generally slow in adopting change, or societal factors.
It wasn't a cultural issue. It wasn't a cultural issue at all, no. That was the question. Sorry? Not quite so. I'll tell you why. It's really fascinating. The reason was because of the way they did their mobile phone numbers. If you want to dial a mobile phone number in Australia, you pretty much know you're dialing. It's got a 04 in front. So you know, and in those days it was quite expensive to dial a mobile phone, you know that you're going to pay for the extra charge. Here's the fascinating thing, in the United States, they didn't choose that. A mobile phone number could look exactly the same as any other phone number. Now guess who paid the difference? If I want to ring a 202 number, and it happens that I'm not in Washington and I'm on the other coast, who pays the $3 a minute between the local call?
The receiver.
The receiver. And so guess who did not want to give out their mobile phone numbers to anybody? Right? The receivers didn't want to give out their phone numbers because they would have to pay whenever they received a call. And so that one very simple choice, an institutional choice by whoever it is that makes phone number choices, I'm not even sure who that really is in the US, but that one institutional choice actually had a massive impact on the adoption of a technology. And these institutional pieces, and I guess, we were talking earlier about being a systems engineer, because that's really what you think about. It's about systems and how the system works. Those institutional choices actually have a big impact, things you don't necessarily see. And to give you another example, and one of the other things that I guess, one of the most important institutional things is to understand that it's not only the interplay between technology and market that's important, but the fact that time frames are important. Sometimes when something happens is just as important as what happens. And to give you an example of that, we're going to do a little experiment. Let's imagine it's 100 years ago. It's 100 years ago and I give everybody in this room £1,000. Okay, I'm feeling very generous tonight. You all have £1,000. You all have £1,000 on one condition. You can invest that in a company that makes cars or a company that makes horses. Where would you invest your £1,000 100 years ago? We're going to ask, who would invest in cars? Who would invest in horses? See, isn't that fascinating? 50-50. Right? And you're absolutely right, everyone, because it's not a cut and dry. Let's compare those two technologies side by side. Let's start with the horse. It's a pretty good technology, isn't it? The horse. It's reliable. It's affordable. It generally starts every morning. Except for that one morning when it doesn't start, and it's probably not going to start again. But anyway, on that note, it's biodegradable. You grew up with a horse. It's got quite a lovely user interface. So it's got some great features. It's cross-country. It's got this awesome autopilot feature that if you've had one too many drinks, you can probably get it to find its way home. It's a great technology. The horse. This is the best thing. You can actually fuel it with stuff you throw in the back paddock. What a great technology the horse is. Now let's compare that to the car 100 years ago. Smelly, unreliable, right? Generally doesn't start when it's really cold. The horse had this little hind leg problem they were trying to work out. The car had the crankshaft problem. Might get hit in the face. It's not affordable. It's very unfamiliar. It's not cross-country. You have to drive these things on roads. You have to buy this stuff called petrol from inconvenient locations that you otherwise wouldn't have to go to. I mean, this horse had a bit of a waste problem, albeit. The car had its own waste problem that we're only just starting to realise. Right? And moreover, and this is where it gets really fascinating, really fascinating, the institutional forces are very much against the car. The horse lobby, and believe it or not, there was a horse lobby and there was a car lobby. The reason why we have an NRMA is that was actually the car lobby. And the NRMA did roadside. Why did they do roadside assistance? Because these damn things didn't work, right? Right? And they did insurance to try to help us, convince us that these things would work, right? So the horse lobby at that time is winning. The horse lobby is convincing everyone to have these things like speed limits. At the time, you couldn't even drive the car faster than you could ride a horse. Licenses. You don't need a license for a horse, you need a license for a car. It got really interesting. In Arizona, there was a road rule that if you were driving in a car and you saw somebody riding a horse, guess what you had to do? You had to pull over to the side of the road, you had to turn off the car and wait for the poor horse to walk past. And you can imagine what adoption of car technology was like in Arizona, right? So you would be forgiven for thinking, just comparing those two technologies side by side, that, I'll invest my £1,000 in horse tech, right? But of course, we know now in hindsight that, of course, if you'd invested in horse tech versus, say, General Motors or whatever it might be, until recently, by the way, and we'll get to that, you would have done a lot better than General Horse Code. Now, why is that? Well, the answer is because time frames matter. Right? And what I did there was a really little trick, right? I just looked at the problem in a very narrow point of time. Let's try to answer the question of the problem completely differently. Let's look at the technology trajectory of those two things. Okay, the horse, right? It had this it's been around for 100,000 years or more, 100 million years. And its usefulness was there, and then it had a couple of leaps when we sort of domesticated, and then we created the saddles and the stirrups. And, that was nice, but horse tech was like this, right? It wasn't going very far. Whereas car tech, right? You think about the internal combustion engine, it was on this sort of pathway. Every year getting better and better and more reliable and more affordable and all the sort of things. And of course, if you look at those trajectories, you just realize, you know what? This one is going to cross that one very, very quickly, and that's the point at which this adoption occurs. Like Ashley mentioned, the fact that the fact that I've got my two sons here, the very fact that the iPad, is about the same age as they are, right, is unbelievable for the amount of adoption that we've had. And it's because basically you get these different curves that actually are starting to cross over each other. And interestingly, we're already seeing new curves, even the internal combustion engine versus the electric vehicle. Embedded coal power plants versus renewables for new investments. They're all simply, if you look at them narrowly, of course you can get a different answer. If you start looking in a much broader context, you can get a completely different result. And this probably then leads me to the work that I did back when I was at CSIRO as a sort of a precursor to the most recent work we've done. But it was really trying to understand some of these broader ways of innovation, trying to understand what are these megatrends, what are these technological changes that are sort of coming through. And I must admit, I was very enamored by this. This was a piece of work that was originally done by a guy called a Russian economist called Kondratiev, and then Chris Freeman and others basically started to build on top of this. But what he identified was that the tide of progress, it ebbs and flows. Right? Technological change is not linear. It doesn't just continue year on year at the same rate. What actually happens is it accelerates and then it decelerates. And then what that produces are these things called waves of innovation. They're all long waves, if you wanted to Google it. These long waves generally start, and you can see that we basically had 5 of them. We've actually had 5 of them since the Industrial Revolution, and this is an amazing piece of work I thought that was done by Allianz, of course, done after the global financial crisis, never really before. And you have a look here, we didn't have this is the S&P 500 rolling 10-year yield. So it's basically it's a proxy for the health of the stock exchange. We didn't have one in the first wave of innovation, which is effectively when we were looking at water power and milling. But then afterwards, what happened is this water power, we started to realise, that was effectively saying, where's the source of energy? We then started to realise we could put the source of energy onto a train and move it around. We then realised we could, and that became the railway. We then realised we could separate that source of energy from where we needed the light, right? This is electrification. Suddenly we could stay up late all night, everyone. Isn't that awesome? And not kill ourselves with indoor air pollution. We then started to realise that we could connect global supply chains together and shrink those motors. And this is where it starts getting really interesting, is because at the beginning of these waves of innovation, you get lots of disruption, you get lots of new businesses being formed, lots of new business models in particular. Towards the middle of a wave of innovation, you get what they call dominant designs. You get AC power versus DC. You get Microsoft Windows versus who can remember what the opposite, what it might have been, right? And then towards the end of a wave, you get a global depression. And that's pretty much on track, is what happened in 2008, 2009. And that's 10 years, I think, almost to the week, since we had the GFC. And so what that's really saying, and again, I find this really fascinating, it means we're right in the middle of the upswing, what they call the upswing. The upswing periods are sort of 10 to maybe 20 years. And we did some work, and again, I actually mentioned tipping points, because the fascinating thing about all of this is it's really pointing out that, again, that technological change is non-linear. Right? We as humans are really funny animals, because we try to make everything linear. And it makes sense. Right? Most of the things in our world are very linear. The world that we evolved into, if you put a stick in a stream, what happens? That stick will go down the stream generally at the same rate. If you see a cheetah running behind a mountain, right, you expect that cheetah to basically go at the same speed. Most of our world, and anything that's non-linear, like dropping a rock, we don't see. It's too quick. So most of our world is linear. So we expect technological change to be linear. We expect, everything to sort of go a bit faster, a bit more each year. But you know what? Technological change is never linear. In fact, it's almost the opposite. It's almost, and this is why we always get surprised. There's another saying that technological change is always faster and slower than we expect. Slower because you basically see, no change, no change, no change. And what happens is it's never linear. It's this S-curve, where it's like nothing, 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 bang. Everyone's got an iPhone. Nothing, 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 bang. Artificial intelligence is, doing purchase orders. Nothing, 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 bang. We're all driving electric vehicles, right? Because there's this non-linear change. And what was really fascinating, and again, it's another piece of work that we did more recently with the World Economic Forum, and we actually said, well, indeed, it's very hard to predict the future, but what you can do is you can start to understand what tipping points there might be for things that are already in play, right? And again, I'll always say this is always with a pinch of salt for all of these sorts of things. But what we did is we actually went out to the entire World Economic Forum community, and we did this fascinating experiment, which was we chose things, and again, you can dig into this, that are fairly certain to happen. There will be a point at which cars will become electric, or there will be a point at which 50% of, in that case, it was 50% of the grid is electrified. There will be all these things, found these points. And then we've asked everyone, how many years out do you believe that to be? What was really fascinating, and here you can see the results from this, what was really fascinating, and I guess a bit confronting, was the fact that when you start looking at these tipping points, and again, these are not necessarily folk who don't know anything, right? These are meant to be experts in their field. You start asking these questions, and you can start to see these tipping points beginning to land, right? And each one of these is a massive disruption to our economies, to our societies. Again, we're seeing disruption occurring already in multiple areas, and not just through technology, through the media, through politics, through whatever. Each one of these tipping points is potentially a massive disruption. And if I could really try to say, you could look at all of that, and it's really quite dense. But for me, it really comes down to one great big thing. And again, other places call it the fourth industrial revolution. Other places, there's a whole lot of ways of thinking about this. But for me, it comes down to one thing that's going on right now. And if I had to go crack at what the next wave of innovation might indeed look like, it's basically this. The digital and the natural world are beginning to converge, or have been converging for quite a while, but in a tipping point fashion are converging more and more rapidly. What do I mean by digital natural world converging? Well, the best way of thinking about this is to take everything that's currently in the natural world, and one day, very soon, we'll have a digital counterpart. Whether it's the light switch over there, whether it's that bottle on the table, whether it's this building, whether it's me, right? We will all have a digital counterpart. And that bottle will have a radio frequency ID tag in it saying, I'm a bottle, for anyone who wants to know that there's a bottle there, right? The building, or the light switch will be connected to the smart grid that will basically know whether it's on or off. And then it will be connected to the building, which is the building management system, will know exactly how many people, and probably already knows exactly how many people are in this room, if anyone wanted to query it, based on the thermal mass that we've just injected, right? And we'll actually start to manage that entirely. I mean, I and you, we've already got our own digital versions of us, right? It's, there's multiple. There's the Facebook version and the LinkedIn version and the mobile phone version. It's, this thing, originally it was a mobile phone and now it's my wallet and eventually my keys, and it'll know my heartbeat and know if I'm falling over and call the ambulance for me, all that sort of stuff, right? This is the digital you. And it's fascinating that digital convergence is happening more and more rapidly. Again, take another example of technology. Before technology, think about the television, right? It used to be the other side of the room. Then it got a bit closer, it became the computer on your desk, then it became the computer on your lap, right? Then it moved to my pocket. Now it's on my wrist, right? Awesome, it's touching me now, right? Soon it's going to, until the point where, people are already starting to see ways in which technology will be implemented. If you have a cochlear implant, it's already there, right? All these things, the digital and the natural worlds are beginning to converge. But also it's really fascinating, and I really hope this works actually, is, we're starting to see the digital world coming back out to the natural world. And here, for example, is a bus stop. I think this is more than a practical joke than anything else, but here's where they literally put a camera on one end and started to superimpose things on it, and you can see the reactions of people, to something which you normally think is quite ordinary and mundane. I love this, because basically what's trying to say, yeah, here comes the tiger. Look at this. Look at that. But what we're realizing really is that, if you think about it, we are, our eyes, this is just an interface to our brains. And what we're starting to find, there's other companies, Magically, and all these other ones that are starting to realize that basically the stuff that we experience, the stuff we see around us, right? This is the digital world starting. You can already have apps where you can hold up the phone and see a house price floating above the house, right? The digital world starts to lead back into the natural world, and that's what I mean around digital and natural convergence. So that was all a bit of a précis to I think the thing that the Warren Center challenged me to talk about, which is a little bit about my journey. Because I was very fortunate in my career that I've been able to be both an engineer, a hardcore systems engineer, and working on a satellite, a project that taught me so much about what it means to build something with diligence and with love. And I was also very fortunate to spend time in the innovation system itself at CSIRO. And I was there for 7 years, really looking at, again, the innovation system and CSIRO's engagement externally. But in 2012, I had a big change. My wife and I both took some time off. We had 2 children. We had a 2-year-old and a 6-month-old, and we decided, Jasper and Oliver, we decided that it was time for us to really spend some time reflecting about what we wanted to do. And my journey actually started while I was taking that time off. And what I realized is that I really love building stuff. And I wanted to go back to building. And I think actually at the very heart of a lot of engineers is building something, and building something you can be truly proud of. So my journey actually started not doing logistics at all. My journey actually started with again, with all of this stuff that you might say in the back of my mind around digital natural convergence, all that sort of thing. It actually started with the realization, and probably not a surprise, I had, with my wife, we had 2 young children. It was actually realizing that there's heaps and heaps of stuff out there. In fact, the most amazing thing when you become a new parent is the amount of stuff that you own by weight pretty much doubles overnight, right? And within a year, most of it is now redundant. Right? It's an amazing process of consumption and then, unconsumption. And what we realized was that basically there was heaps of stuff that's sitting in people's homes that no longer is needed. And we realized that actually now there were technologies available to make sure that to get that stuff in our home. Weirdly enough, a bag of baby clothes you can't really sell, if you think about it, right? There's very little residual value in it. And in fact, it's too much effort to try to sell it. And our central thesis was that actually people were happy to give that stuff away for free if only make it really easy. And what we then found, and this was about 2013, we built this thing, it was called 2Share, it was great, we had about 50,000 people all effectively transacting, it got liquid, which is a big thing for a 2-sided marketplace. And we also realized that one of the biggest pain points we had to solve, this is where it got interesting, was people like to transact, but they didn't necessarily want to meet, just that saying, and they didn't want to drive across town to pick up the bag of baby clothes, and that's where our business model came from, right? Like, we can give you this stuff for free, just pay for the shipping. Completely opposite to the 2Share, to the Amazon sort of experience, where you get the stuff, you pay for the stuff, and you get the shipping for free. And so by 2013, the end of 2013, we built this service, and we realized that we needed to basically organize and solve the problem of getting stuff from one person to another. And here's where it got really fascinating. What we realized in Australia, by digging a bit deeper, was that there was no single service out there that could do door-to-door delivery, because no one's going to line up at the post office in order to basically send a parcel. So give something away for free. But they could do it cheaply and affordably. But we ended up working out that you could do it if you just go to the, and again, this is part of the whole process, talk to a lot of the big business careers. And I guess the realization was they've got a lot of idle capacity in their networks. Here is an entire community that wants to use that idle capacity. Yeah, if we do all the customer support, if we do all the billing, if we take all the pain for you, will you give us marginal rates? And what's really fascinating is we end up building a solution for ourselves. Then we get to 2014, and we'd been, happily had customers transacting on this really, and I still remember it was Elaine, the first one turned up for Elaine. The marketplace started to fail. And I'll tell you how the marketplace started to fail. People started to hack it, right? Instead of a bag of baby clothes that was all nice and say, here, who would like my bag of baby clothes? We started to see these parcels appear. And the parcel would say, for Elaine, right? Or for Louise, or something. It's like, they're not giving this away to just anyone, because they reject anyone else if it wasn't Louise and Elaine doing it. It's like, what is going on here? And what we realized in 2014 is that we had inadvertently created a very efficient, minimum order quantity one shipping solution. And we hadn't even really thought about it before, but it wasn't until, and to give you a sense of how affordable it was, and this is still the case, if you want to send 10 kilograms from Sydney to Perth, you can line up at the post office and spend $45 per egg. We will pick it up from you, right, deliver it door to door for less than 20, right, less than 50% off. I can still pick up a parcel There's 25 kilograms and send it anywhere in Sydney, generally on the same day, door to door, including the Blue Mountains. Right? The cost difference and the efficiency that we were giving people was enormous. And that's when I guess we realised that there was actually this amazing national pastime that we seem to be all engaged in, right? Which is called lining up at the post office. We love to do it somehow, apparently, because we do it so often. The average person goes to the post office 8 times, right, every quarter. It's an amazing thing that we do, and generally, we realised that we could actually reduce a lot of this pain by simply through the application of technology, simply by unlocking big business logistics networks and making them available to small business. Because there is this entire network out there that normally these small businesses and consumers cannot access. What was also we realised is that of that small business market, our dear friends at Australia Post actually own 85% of it. And for those who are entrepreneurs, one of the best things you can do, and there's not that many around anymore, the best thing you can do is find a monopoly. Right? Monopolies are great. Because monopolies are actually, it makes it really simple for you to understand who you're going to, what service you want to do. And in fact, this is a fantastic monopoly because it was sort of like a monopoly wrapped in a habit. If you say to most people, I need to send a parcel, what do? I'll go to the post office. It's a habit. It's invisible. Right? A monopoly wrapped in a habit is completely invisible to most people. We didn't even see it ourselves. And so what we realized was that there was an opportunity to take what we built, the technology that we built, take it out and make it into a courier, a parcel delivery service that was 100% suited to the needs of small business. Because the other thing that we realised in this process was that there's this huge economy that's starting to grow. Again, whether it's the folks on Etsy or eBay or folk wanting to have a second business on the side, that is the fastest growing part of the entire e-commerce market. And it's all based on small businesses, all helping these small businesses to thrive. So we launched this in 2015. The amazing thing about it was that we were doing a certain amount of volume on 2Share. Within 1 month, we were doing the same amount of volume on Sendle, and that business has been going for 2 years. And then the most amazing thing is we've now hit over 36 months of 14% on average monthly growth. To the point that we're now, last time we looked, we facilitated over $200 million worth of small business e-commerce in Australia. And these are businesses, we have so many businesses who say they would not exist if we weren't there. Because not only are those rates really great, but it's the same rate from sending from Armidale to Perth as it is from sending to Sydney to Perth. Or indeed from Perth to Geelong, right? We actually believe we're leveling the playing field, not just in terms of small and big business, but actually geographically as well. What's even more fun, and just to sort of give you a sense of how much of a nerd I really am, is we've now sent a parcel 19 astronomical units, which is 19 times to the sun. That's the full distance that we've been able to send, right? It's amazing. Right? We're sending parcels, and to the point where we can actually send parcels out anywhere around the world. It got more fun when our dear friends at Post decided that they didn't like us using the trademark Post without the office. And indeed, again, they probably did us a great favour at that point. But it's never, what was really fascinating, we trademarked this phrase because we thought, what's a great way of encapsulating what we built? Well, it's sort of Post without the office. And, my wife was there when we got the letter from Ashurst, the law firm, where it was literally cease and desist, we're going to throw everything we can at you. But we thought, no, this is silly. Right? We're not trying to pass ourselves off as the post office, we're actually trying to say this is the differentiation for the post office. And so for 2 years we battled and had the ability to use that. What was really interesting, and again, we heard this earlier, we even got to the point where last year we actually named the best courier in Australia, based on user feedback and user reviews through a thing called product review. And more recently, and this is even just a week and a half old, and I think it's fascinating, is we've now started to hit the global stage, and this I guess is going to be where we start to go in 2019. And this is quite exciting. We've actually managed to make it onto the global tech map. And the bit that I'm proud of is that there's 2 Australian companies on board. One of them has now moved to the US called Flirty, and they're a great company as well. We're now the only Australian-based company on the global logistics technology map. And what did we really do? Well, what we did is we basically said, and again, coming back to real modern, models, what we worked out was a very simple idea, but it's an idea that I think is starting to really play into a lot of things we're seeing around the world. The idea that you can actually be a company that doesn't have to own all your own assets, right? Again, it's the same idea that Uber has. It's the same idea that Airbnb has. It's the same idea that Alibaba has. You could be the biggest hotel chain in the world. You could be the greatest, or the biggest taxi company in the world. You could be the biggest retailer in the world, but you don't actually have to own anything. And hopefully, maybe you can be, we think of the best small business career in the world without necessarily having to own any assets. So that's been my journey, and again, to wrap up, I was again challenged to, so what have I learned on that journey, and what could I actually share? And I really encapsulate that in 5 big lessons of my journey. Not everything about engineering, but actually often about the stuff that sits around the engineering. And so I'll share that with you now. The first is, and you can see here, engineer everything. What do I mean by that? Well, it's fascinating. If you'd asked me 5 years ago and about product development and so on, I would have talked to you so much about, the systems and the products and what we're building. And yes, we've built an incredible experience for our customers. And yes, everyone pays lip service to this idea. This is my very poor way of trying to describe product market fit. I don't think it really worked, but anyway, that's the best I should do. But basically, everyone talks about this concept of product market fit, right? And engineers sort of go, okay, I'm going to be the product guy. I'm going to build this thing. And I'm going to leave it to someone else to be the market person. Right? That's actually, I see it so many times with engineering founders and others. And we've got to the point where we've got this thing called lean and agile and stuff like that. We apply that to our product and we get really good at it. But what I've really worked out, and I've been very fortunate that I've had some amazing people in the marketing world, Craig Davis and more recently Eva Ross, who've helped us to see that you can actually do the same thing to marketing as you've done to product. Right? We have this, because digital and natural have converged. They call it traction, like thinking about the channels, the traction channels that get to market. You can actually engineer marketing more than you ever have before. You can actually get to the point, it's not just your product, it's the product around your product that you're building. It's the interface between what you've built and everything else. And as an engineer, the moment I realized that, the moment I realized that you can actually bring your engineering skills to bear on what you often is thought of as the warm and fuzzy, softer side, grey areas, or whatever, you can actually, and what they mean, there's 19 traction channels out there, everybody. There's 19 channels, 19 ways in which products can get to market, and you can actually measure and manage and optimize every single one of those. And I guess what I realized, and originally I thought it was like, I can be an engineer and I need to work with other people. I realized, you know what? Let's just engineer everything. Let's actually think about our business as a whole system, as about, again, I think about the marketing wheel, customer support wheel, network wheel. All those wheels have to spin up at the same time, and make sure that one wheel doesn't outstrip the other. Let's make sure that marketing doesn't outstrip our customer support, or we won't be the best career in Australia. Make sure that the network can always work. So engineering everything, not just the stuff that you typically think as an engineer, is the stuff that you can actually build. The second piece, and again, I found really fascinating this entire journey, is that ultimately culture, and again, things that we often, I believe as a profession, we often neglect. And again, I'll talk just from personal experience. This was the stuff that I used to hate at university, and I can't believe I'm talking about it because it was so warm and fuzzy. But you know what? The way people work together, right? You can build the best thing by yourself. But ultimately, and in fact, this is the definition of complexity that I used in my PhD, because it was all about complex product systems. Still my favourite definition of complexity. How do you know when something is complex? Right? It's complex when it's too complex for one single person to understand. Right? It's a great definition because it immediately starts to say that if you're going to work in a complex system, right, you need to think about the way the interfaces, you need to think about the ways in which people are starting to interact. And because you want to build a complex system, because you want your thing to scale, you actually have to let go and realise that you're never going to be able to understand it all by yourself. And so culture is greater than strategy, and again, we sort of, in a very systems engineering way, because I can't not think in that way, I realised that there were actually a set of people that I liked to work with, that I thought worked, even more importantly, worked really well together. And this is what we call the 5 H's. And this is, again, to nerd out, it's got to be in this order. We thought about humble, honest, happy, hungry, and then high performing. And why was it in that order? Because you know what? I actually believe you can find high performing people, but you need to find people who are more humble than the high performing. Right? You need to find people who are hungry and want to do things and improve, but they have to be more honest than they're hungry. And indeed, they even cascade. Humility, I believe, creates honesty. Honesty actually breeds positivity and a growth mindset. That creates hunger and ambition, and that creates high performance. What's really fascinating is every single person that we've actually had who joined Sendle, and there's quite a few of them now, no matter which role they are, have all gone through that same lens. Right? We love diversity. We have so many cultures, so many backgrounds, so many, genders. Yes, actually, so many genders. We love that there's diversity. The one thing we all, I believe, is that everyone's humble, honest, happy, hungry, and that is the piece that binds us, and that helps us to create a strategy. A culture that ultimately outstrips any sort of strategy you could possibly ever think about. My third, big lesson, and this is again, I think, a piece that I think comes from a deep engineering sense, is that you've got to love your problems. Right? What an engineer is, they're a builder and they're a problem solver. One of the best things, I think, around our business, we found a really painful problem to solve. Who really likes lining up the post-its? Does anyone? That's a rhetorical question, right? Like, it's not a fun thing to do. Maybe it will be in the future, I don't know. But at the moment, it's not a fun thing to do. We found that we could love that problem. You know what? And it wasn't just one problem. There were 14, and we've gone and really don't, there were 14 problems sending a parcel, right? They can be, and they're everything from lining up, yes, but, complex pricing, difficult to track. We went through them all. And what we said is we're not just going to solve one of them, we're going to solve all of them, right? And that is what makes a really sticky service. And this is, the concept of friction, identifying what is the friction in your system, loving that friction, understanding it better than anyone else. If you understand a problem better than anyone else, you can create a solution that is better than anyone else. And indeed, again, thinking about things as a system, we've got so many tools that we use now to talk to people. You've got social media, you can blast, we've got hundreds of thousands of folk who've got Sendle accounts. Right? Very few people turn those around from blast to listen. Again, the best companies, the ones who actually love their problems, love the negative feedback. Right? It's hard to get the negative feedback, but you can take it and you improve and you get better and better and better. The other part of loving your problems is you've got to know when to kill your darlings. And what I mean by this is you actually got to take it on the chin when somebody gives you feedback that's rubbish. We had this, in the early days of Sendle, and it was a hangover from Touche, is we had this great idea, if you wanted to, you could send a parcel without a label. Right? How do you do that? Well, we had code words, where we'd give you some words and you'd write it on the code words, and it was normally from red apple to purple elephant, whatever it might be, right? You could write these words we would give you, and then the courier would come and stick a label on it. Sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Well, we got to this day and we thought, you know what, it's Christmas, let's change all the code words to become Christmas code words. And, you know, this is literally one from 2 festive socks from Mary Ellis. Anyway, what we hadn't realised, one, is that chimneys and things like that just do not go well in the Christmas code words, but the other thing we realised is that small business hates it. We thought it was cool, right? But really, for so many of our business customers, it was not on brand. There's like, why are you calling me a festive elf, right? It was actually something, and you know, we took it on the chin and we said, we're going to get rid of this. We all thought it was the best thing ever, and we had to get rid of it, right? You've got to listen and you've got to learn. The fourth thing that I've learned, and I guess this is a piece, again, that we dig into a lot, is understanding your purpose, right? Understanding why you are doing what you're doing. You know, it's a Simon Sinek thing. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do what you do, right? It's not enough to build a bridge, right? You're building a bridge to connect to community, right? And what's really fascinating, and I talked a little bit about these ways of innovation. What's really fascinating is that understanding the purpose itself can be engineered, right? The whole story, for example, and when we understand that purpose itself is shifting, right? You can actually, the stack of things that we build is actually starting to evolve. And to give you an example of that, let's imagine, you know, back in that first wave of innovation, where did value get created? Right? Value was created through commodities. Right? In some ways, we were digging stuff out of the ground. Right? And then some clever people said, you know what, I can create more value by getting those commodities and turning them into things, products. Right? Products became composed out of commodities. Then somebody came along and said, you know what, it's not enough to have a phone. Right? If products are made out of commodities, I can make services out of those products. And now 80% of our economy, by the way, is service-based. Right? People don't want the phone, they don't want the product, they want the phone call. Right? That's more valuable. But if commodities compose into products, and products compose into services, what indeed do services compose into? Right? Services compose into experiences. Right? Interestingly enough, and the airlines know this really well, right? The airlines understand it's not about the flight from A to B, it's all the services that go up to make the flight, right? It's the online, the expedited check-in, it's the little meal that you get, it's the little bottle of wine that you might get, it's the in-flight entertainment, right? It's a whole composition of services that make up an experience, and the airlines that have the best experience are the ones who win. But here's where it gets really funny, really fantastic. If commodities compose into products, products compose into services, services compose into experiences, what do experiences compose into? Well, they compose into meaning. Right? It's not the flight, it's the trip. It's why are you flying? Right? And it's the companies that realize to tap into that purpose, to tap into that meaning, right? That you're not, again, Sendle, we're not here to send parcels, we're here to help small business thrive. Because we know how to do that. But we succeed when they succeed. That is our entire purpose. And that becomes a really deep way in which you can do business. The very last one, and again, where you can actually bring engineering to bear, and this is the story of all startups, the story of all businesses, is frankly, you have to choose wisely. And what do I mean by that? Well, generally for startups, in fact, really is a great thing. What's the one thing that kills all startups? Anyone have got this? All businesses, actually. What's the one thing that kills all businesses? No customer, no?
Lack of money.
Too many people close. Lack of money.
Competition.
I'll count all of those.
Good team.
Wrong team, I'll tell you. Time. Right? My thesis is that most of these things, and team was an interesting one, most of these things are all a symptom of running out of time. Right? You run out of time, so you run out of money. You run out of time, somebody else does what you do. You run out of time to find the customers you need to find. The thing that kills all startups is time. And it's realising, and indeed the lack of focus is actually, what's the antidote to time? The antidote to time is focus. Right? Lack of focus, you try to do too many things, and again, you just run out of time. You don't become brilliant at any of them. And the story of a startup is generally one which is having to make choices, wise choices, before you run out of time. I guess what we found, and it's really fascinating because this choosing wisely is really interesting because it's got two edges to the sword. One, you've got to make, and the way I think about it is there's two types of choices, right? What I think about is reversible and irreversible choices, right? Reversible choices, and this actually applies to life, I think, as well. Reversible choices are things where you can make a choice and it's not the end of the world, right? What would you like to have for breakfast? Well, I could either choose some cereal or I could choose a chocolate cake, right? You know what? You eat the chocolate cake, it's fine. You go to the gym, it's sort of done, right? It's a reversible choice. Just don't, this is the key, just don't do those, make sure you get about 80% of the reversible choices right. But those reversible choices, so they're the ones you try to make as quickly as possible and make sure you're getting most of them right. But they don't have to all be right because they're reversible. There's a second set of choices, right? The second set of choices are irreversible choices. These are choices which once you've made them, it's very hard to unmake. Which market do you pursue? The moment you choose which market to pursue, your brand is associated with the market. It's very hard to unmake that. Who do you employ, right? Who do you take money from, investment from? We turned down $1 million from one company because it said we don't want you to be a B Corp anymore. We were Australia's first technology benefit corporation. And their term sheet was, you cannot be a term. We said, great, you need to not an investor for us. Because we knew that was a one-way decision. You can't invest for most people in the start. So understanding what was a reversible and therefore really quick decision versus what was a irreversible and therefore really important decision is really important because once you can start to differentiate between those and get really good at speed for one and quality for the other, that's when you can actually start to accelerate. And we have basically a tool, because we also want to do everything, but we have a tool for the irreversible decisions. And we think about there's 3 answers to any question for those irreversible decisions. It's like, yes, would you like a cup of coffee? You've got 3 answers. You've got, yes, I would, no, I wouldn't, and hell yeah, right? Whoops, basically, hell yeah becomes one of the key things that you actually have to say. There it is, thank you, Leonardo. Hell yeah. And basically we realised that for the really important decisions you have to make, and this actually, again, I think it applies very much to life, how do you get yourself to hell yeah? How do you get, in fact, for the big things in our business, we actually go around the table for every recruitment, for every major choice, and everyone has to be hell yeah. Because for the big decisions, a yes, a tepid yes, is actually the same as a no. So that was my 5 things. I think I'm going to end with a bit of a saying, and this is something that Ashley also mentioned, which is that speed. Again, I talked about time. And there's a saying, in the past it used to be the big eat the small. But you know what? In this world of disruption, this world of things changing, and the whole purpose of disruption is it's not that. It's actually that the fast eat the slow. That indeed you can think about change now, and I guess it's not true. Things are accelerating, right? And one of the reasons, this is a really fascinating thing. The other story about those waves of innovation is that this, starting in the 5th, things started to change. What I mean by things started to change? Until then, most of our technology was all about leveraging human muscle. Right? Think about it. Cars are just better legs. Washing machines are better arms. Right? Most change was all about leveraging human muscle. But along came the 5th wave of innovation and information technology. Now it's more about leveraging human intelligence. Right? What does that mean? It means more brain power being applied to problems. And at the same time, we're also applying, this is some work that Michael Kramer did. You could argue that the rate of change in the world is proportional to the number of brains in the world, or at least the number of brains connected deeply to the world. And we've seen a huge number of brains come out of poverty in the last 30 years, and the effectiveness of those brains. Right? And you put that together and you realise that the rate of change that we're actually about to see is enormous and accelerating. Because we're getting better and we're augmenting all the time. So the biggest lesson is the fast beat the slow. That speed becomes the most important thing. And the opposite of that is adaptability. The ability to change becomes one of the core competencies of, again, any business. And indeed, people in general. Which brings me back again, finally, to the engineering profession. And while I'm amazed that the 20-year-old engineer probably would never have, that was me, probably never would have thought that if I was to have the honour of giving the Brinson Innovation Lecture, I would be talking about culture and change and management. I actually think that has been the greatest gift that I've learned over the last 20 years, of how to try to meld and join together those technical skills that I was given as an engineer, as a systems engineer, thinking about the broader processes and systems that are out there, and join them together with, my passion to build and to drive change, and to actually create something that I can be truly proud of. For me, that, and I'll probably finish here, I think the thing that for me sums up the engineering profession, the highest form of engineering excellence, is the joining of technical proficiency with beauty. Right? It's when you can actually get together the hard and the soft sciences. It's when you can join them and actually use it to create something that never has been before. That, I think, is the true joy of being an engineer. So thank you again, and it's been a delight to talk to you tonight.